If you remember, our last day of load shedding was on the 26th of March.
And since then, increasingly skeptical South Africans have been certain that the longest stretch without load shedding since 2011 will come to an abrupt end once our votes are cast.
Eskom and the Electricity Minister both reassuring us that plants have been performing better and planned maintenance is being done. But what's going to happen next week, which is expected to be fairly chilly? Will we still have enough power?
We speak now to energy expert Mohamed Madhi. Mr. Madhi, good afternoon. Thanks very much for your time. Really appreciate it. I mean, those of us who remain, of course, cynical will be proven wrong, at least according to Eskom, the board, and the management leadership there. Has there been any independent, assessment or verification of Eskom's and the government's claims as to what may be responsible for what we've seen over the past couple of months?
So good afternoon, Vuyo and Stephen. I think that's a great question, and unfortunately there hasn't been. And in fact, most of what we've heard and experienced over the last year or so has had very little independent verification. But there are means and methods by which we can test what has been said. And one of those, for example, is to assess the statements made just prior to this period where there was no load shedding compared to the statements made over the last few weeks. And we'll see that prior to the period, this, light age, if you want to call it, there was very little prediction that there would be no load shedding for such a long or an extended period of time. So clearly, the indicators, the statistics, the probability, all point to the fact that the plants were still not running at a sort of manner and at the efficiency that they should have been. Then all of a sudden, we have this period of no load shedding. So that is probabilistically very, very unlikely what has happened. And there isn't an adequate explanation from the minister or Eskom or anyone else. All that we've had so far is, that the planned maintenance that's been happening has now come to fruition. But it wouldn't, for that to all come to fruition at this point in time, just prior to May 29th, is very unlikely. So there are those kinds of parameters that we can use to assess, and that gives us a little bit of skepticism about what is being said.
The other issues, Mohamed, can also be, of course, that the private sector is generating more power, around 5,000 megawatts. That, of course, is, when the wind is blowing and the sun is up. And at the same time, there's less demand because people, some industry just isn't working in the same way that it used to. Are those factors significant in all of this?
Absolutely. So I think the opposite of a perfect storm would probably be a perfect calm, I guess, is what we've had over the last 6 weeks or so, a little longer. And that is we've had good weather. We've had the private sector adding more power as they've continuously been adding. And we've had, the effect, we have to acknowledge, there has been the effect of good maintenance on the plants as well, so that together. So these factors combined have led to what we see now. But I think that a very critical explanation of what is going on is to understand that the power plants can run in a very specific mode where you're able to have high availability, where you're able to have high capacity for a certain period of time, typically between 3 and 6 months. And this is not advisable to do that, and especially on aged power plants, but it can be done. And I suspect that this is most likely what is happening. And we'll see a gradual easing up of that. There won't be a sudden easing on May the 30th, some people may be expecting. But by June, July, depending on how cold it gets, you are going to get this increased unavailability. Of course, the mitigating factor continuously is the phenomenal amounts of private sector power being added to the power mix in the country.
Mohamed Madhi, thank you, energy expert. Really appreciate the time on the Ballot Brief tonight.